In this episode, I'm getting real with Helen Min, co-founder and managing partner at Phenomenal Ventures, which she co-founded with Mina Harris. Helen is a badass in every sense of the word. She started her fintech journey as head of marketing at Plaid before moving her way to the investor side to truly make her mark in the world. In this episode, Helen and I are getting into why sitting in the VC role was so important to her, the core values of Phenomenal Ventures, and why she started her own firm. And she gives us a breakdown of how the fintech and venture capitalist ecosystem can more holistically be diverse, inclusive, and make a shit ton of money. I'm so excited for you to get to know Helen. She is filled with so much insights and knowledge. I learned so much from this conversation. So I hope you enjoy this talk with Helen Min. Thanks for joining me, Helen, on Humans of FinTech.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be.
Yeah, so stoked. You've definitely made a splash in the fintech and venture world recently. But before we get into all of that, I want to talk about how your journey into fintech actually began, which is with joining Plaid in 2017 as head of marketing. Why was that role the best possible way for you to understand the fintech industry?
Yeah, so I think timing also has a lot to do with it as well. If you remember back to 2017, I think that was sort of when crypto started to dominate the headlines and become, it started reaching consumers in a real way. And so Plaid is an infrastructure company. They provide banking APIs to connect consumers' bank accounts to fintech apps, very, very simply. And so joining, I think, an infrastructure layer within fintech that was so, growing so quickly at the time was almost like this academic approach, like when you really get to dive into the different verticals that an infrastructure layer can serve. So like, I contrast that experience to joining like a hot fintech company at the time. So like Coinbase or Robinhood, or like a payments company, like you would have been learning a lot about that, I think, particular sort of area within fintech. But Plaid, they supported apps and use cases across B2B and B2C. So I learned a ton about apps in the consumer finance space, wealth management, payments, like B2B and mortgage and lending, which is super different, and of course all the neobanks that popped up then too. So it was almost like this like academic approach to learning the entire fintech landscape that I thought was pretty unique.
You got to go to FinTech University, basically. So.
Yeah, exactly. It's like my dad is a retired history professor, and when people ask me like, what would you do if money was no object, I'd say like I'd be a student forever. And so it was a very sort of like an academic approach to learning this really exciting new category. And now I think fintech is popular, and it's oftentimes, like frankly more often than not lately, the like dominant sort of investment area for a lot of big funds. But at the time it was brand new and super exciting.
Yeah, I mean, what kind of gaps do you see when you're going to FinTech University? You get to see all of the different elements, like you said, right? Not just one thing, but all of the infrastructure plays in all of the different areas that is fintech, which sounds overwhelming actually. So way to navigate all of that.
Yeah. And, maybe even though 2017 doesn't seem like that long ago, it's like within my son's lifetime. So definitely not that long ago. But at the time, I think the overwhelming feeling wasn't so much the gaps. It was like the opportunity and the possibilities. Because I think when anything is new, you have an opportunity to rewrite it in a way that perhaps the existing, structure, doesn't quite allow for as much change. So what I think I specifically mean by that is because fintech was so new, and I think there was already this sort of like archetype of like the finance bro or men really dominating, like the global financial services conversation. Fintech felt like, well, okay, they say that 50% of entry-level roles within financial services are held by women, and then drastically it goes down from there as you move the ranks. fintech, I felt like had this opportunity to really think about sort of equity and inclusiveness sort of from the beginning. And I think that at the time, it really felt like, I think Plaid's mission at the time was to democratize access to the financial system. I think they've done a couple iterations on that mission, but at the time, it was really, really inspiring. I mean, they are B2B2C in that, like, they're selling to developers, right, who are building apps that are truly for everyone. So the C part of, I think, Plaid's mission was so inspiring in that, everybody touches money. I don't think that fintech is a category that is going to be for a certain type of person. Like, demographic wise, it's just, when you think about who is the target audience for the dollar bill, it's like, no, it truly has to serve everyone. And so I think less so at the time, noticing the gaps, I think I saw just tons of opportunity. I'll pivot, that conversation to today is sort of like that reflection to today. And I know it's only been 6 years, although it feels like so much longer because of the pandemic and, many other things. But I think that I still have a lot of, a lot of hope for this to be an area that if 50% of the people entering financial services are women, I think it should be that 50% of the people entering, fintech are women. And, if at the end of the day, the end user is everyone, then I don't think we should just be leaving it to men to start these companies. So still lots of opportunity. There are some gaps now that fintech is, a couple years old. But, still early days.
Right. Well, to me, it feels like almost, one, you got to what really got me attracted to the space too, was like, okay, we have this like opportunity to really make this not only the industry and who it serves, but also just within internally this incredibly equitable space for women, men, everybody. And that was like the hook. I was like, all right, this is awesome. I like it here. And as the years go by though, it's like, okay, well, we have to, we're at like almost like a tipping point, or like we're getting older and we don't, we have a long way to go before we are as old as like a traditional financial system. But still, I always think of it like every, day and year matters, so we have to be like doing something to work towards that regularly.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm no like crypto enthusiast. So one thing that I'll say, as somebody who's not like, I don't think anyone thinks of me as like a particularly like a huge crypto enthusiast, but one thing that was super inspiring to see, because I think of crypto as like, part of fintech, was that there was so much excitement and momentum, and it really did feel inclusive in this way that I hadn't seen in a while. And so like, that energy, anytime something is new, I just really think that there's an opportunity to set it in a good direction from the beginning. As somebody who has been a part of, lots of startups that then became large public companies. So like I was an early employee at Facebook, and I was an early employee at Dropbox and Quora and Plaid and others. If you really think about diversity from the beginning, it makes things super easy down the road. I think that the thing that, really great diverse teams have in common is that they had that from the beginning, and it wasn't something that they sort of put like a code red effort on later on. And so, I think, fintech, like I said, still being in its early days, hopefully we're inspiring people, all sorts of people to build. Yeah.
And I think just being in our seats and being who we are and being in the spaces and having us, win and make money is the exact way to do that. So after Plaid, you landed at AngelList. How did that experience really inform how you started Phenomenal Ventures?
Yeah, I think it was a couple things. So while I was at Plaid, I started to angel invest a little bit more. And then when I joined AngelList, combination of working for a venture capital platform, again, like an academic approach, going to VC university, and learning about venture capital through the lens of like an infrastructure layer because of their fund admin and sort of the way they hook into the ecosystem, both LPs, GPs, and founders. I think that the picking up my angel investing, wanting to try out all the AngelList products, a couple other things that converged, like they launched rolling funds in January of 2020, right before the pandemic, and rolling funds just took off, and it was really exciting to be a part of what felt like a big change in VC. That frankly, there hadn't been like a big change in venture capital for like 60 years, and so having a product that really inspired people and to either start their own fund or have a side hustle as a fund. Like we saw a lot of founders start their own funds. And then, of course, when the pandemic hit, like we saw a huge surge in people sitting at home and being able to take a lot of Zoom meetings or having to fly around. And so that enabled people to, make investments faster, raise funds faster. And so to be a platform that, not only enabled that, but almost had a role in accelerating a lot of that was super exciting. And then so, of course, just continue to build, I was part of that excitement as well, and increased my angel investing, and then thought about starting my own fund from there. And so I would say that very much the thesis for Phenomenal Ventures, both Mina and I, it's a way for us to scale what we felt was working really well in our own angel investing.
Yeah, I mean, I love that. I think there's something about what happened during just the pandemic and being able to take that step back and say, okay, I really love this piece of what I did in the past or this piece of what I did at this company, and then go off and build it yourself. I feel like there are stories out there today how there is just a larger swell of female entrepreneurs and people building their own thing, because why not? And we have all these technology and tools to do so, and building you have with Phenomenal Ventures. So do tell us a little bit more about it and why starting this was so important to you, outside of marrying all of your passions and things together.
I think at the time, especially, I still think this is true, but at the time, the thing that we saw, because we saw so many people successfully raise their first fund or run a lot of syndicates on AngelList and then pivot to perhaps raising a fund. The thing that all of these successful GPs had in common was that they had a great network. And, that network was something that enabled them to get great deal flow, so allocation and access, frankly, to the best deals. And so I think, having been in tech for about 14 years at that point, just looking back and said, I am so fortunate to have had, to have also this great network and access to great deals. At the time, I think I had invested in about 30 companies as an angel investor, and I had some winners, and so I think just wow, I actually I'm so lucky to actually be one of those people. The only difference is that I'm a woman. I think we saw most of the funds that were popping up on AngelList led by men, and so. I think for me, it was just like a natural evolution, but also sort of like, okay, do I jump and do this opportunity? As somebody who's worked in tech for a long time, particularly like with startups, of course, the thought had crossed my mind about starting my own company. And I think, it's just, I have so much respect for founders. I'm talking to founders all day as an investor. Got to know a lot of founders, of course, in my operating roles. And it's just not something that, I thought that I would do. And I don't think that that's a problem. I think it's just I know myself very well, and I know like the environments and that I thrive, and where I'm like my best self. And so starting a fund to me felt very entrepreneurial, right? Like you have to, what are you going to call the fund? What's the thesis? Why should LPs pick you? Why should founders pick you? And so I think that the time there and really thinking about being intentional about how I wanted to start a fund, because it truly did feel like in 2020, 2021, like, that phrase, like everyone and their mom has a venture fund now, like that really felt true when we worked at AngelList, and, we were adding more funds to the rolling funds platform like every day. So, yeah. Well,
I like what you said about knowing yourself well. Helen, I can't even tell you, I go to conferences and I get asked to like speak, and I'm often asked like, oh, well, what's like a big leadership quality you look for? What's like your go-to leadership quality, or, how do you build audiences, whatever, win, right? And I'm like, well, do you know who you are authentically, like as yourself? And, most people will answer that with like, well, one, they look shocked that that's what I said, because they're expecting me to say like, know your team and be a good empath and la da da. Yeah. And yes, that stuff is important, but I mean, how do you really lead anything unless you fundamentally know who you are? And of course, that's like that you do that every day through time, and it's always a learning experience. But unless you're like actively learning who you are and who your values are all the time, it's got to be kind of hard to run something and do it well, right?
Yeah, and I think that the things that a lot of people consider when they start their own fund, whether as as just like a new emerging fund manager building a firm, or as a solo GP, is how comfortable do you feel being like the spokesperson for this fund? I have so many friends who have had really successful careers in venture capital, but they are part of like a top tier fund that everybody knows, right? And they will say to me like, I've never fundraised, or I get invited to these things because I'm part of this fund. Like, I don't know if they even care who I am. And that stuff is really interesting. I mean, it's like identity. And so I think for me, I made this comment about seeing so many men start funds on AngelList. I think that the self-awareness kicked in for me, where I was like, what am I going to call this thing? Like the Helen Min Fund? Like, I think other female emerging managers have done that, and like, oh my God, like respect. But I couldn't do it. So, and also remember when like Katie Haun started her
that's firm, exactly who
people gave her crap for, and I'm like, how every other fund is named after the male founders and GPs. But anyways, so, I think for me, teaming up with Mina was perfect because, one, like we had been friends for a very long time. We met at Facebook in 2008. And she had been looking for a partner for a while. I think I was somebody who like was very interested in venture and starting this fund and running it. But the thing that was giving me the hesitation was just sort of like, especially as a marketer, the expectations for the type of brand my firm would have were so high. So Mina, a little bit about her, she, my partner, she had started this expectations around having a brand. So a little bit about Mina, if you guys don't know. So she started this company called Phenomenal in 2017 while she was an Uber employee. And it started as like an activist apparel brand and very quickly grew into like a 360 media company, always, telling stories about women and communities of color. And so it had been about, 6 years into the business then. And, the brand really shared my personal values and, as her friend, something that I've been really excited about and especially watching grow. And something I wanted to be a part of. And so together we formed Phenomenal Ventures and decided to do that full time for me in Q4 of 2021. Yeah. And we started fundraising in January of 2022 and closed the fund December of last year.
Yeah. Well, you took a brand that your friend created and resonated with you and your values, and then you added ventures to it and made it a thing.
I mean, totally. Like, yeah, I think people who are very close to me, they're like, oh, you actually get to be in the position that you are comfortable and familiar with while taking on something totally new. Mm-hmm. And so, because I think people are very curious about Mina and my like dynamic and, how do we share responsibilities and sort of what are different roles in with the firm. And so I think those who are closest to me and know me well, they're like, oh, you're actually in like the ideal spot. Because if you think about the way that I've been interacting, with the CEO and founders in my CMO roles, it's always like, they're front and center and I'm in the back, but I'm definitely the one that is, being really sort of strategic about like how we position and sort of what the message is. And so I get to still, do my CMO role while being in a really exciting new sort of career pivot and industry. And, frankly, at the time, it really did seem like there were so many funds. And people have been asking me too, like, well, how, tell me about the transition of going from being a marketer to a full-time investor. And it's like, honestly, especially in the early days, like, you know, when you're fundraising and you're pitching and you're talking to founders, like differentiation is everything when you know, so a product is commoditized. And it really did feel like there were so many funds and so many angel investors who had big names. And so I think being able to really double down on telling your story, you know, your brand, your values, your value add, you know, was something that I felt very comfortable with doing.
Yeah. Marketing matters. Look, look. I was at this fintech conference last week, and someone on stage said that, you know, I know that when times are tough, we all decide to cut marketing budgets right away. But I feel like, and she was kind of speaking to like the SVB fallout, and she's just like, I feel like maybe now's a really good time to really tighten up our stories, everybody, in reality, right? And so maybe don't like cut those marketing budgets so quickly. But like the power of brand, right? Like the power of the message, the power of all of that. I mean, we're at a time where, because of social, because of the way the world is in this moment, that people want more personal stories than ever before to do literally anything, especially business, right? And so I think that kind of like feeds into Phenomenal Ventures and this like unapologetically feminist brand, right? Especially tied with like Mina and what you've created, you know, no diversity mandate for the fund and the firm, but always with the aspiration to invest in women, diverse groups, you know, open to all, right? But with that mindset, I mean, how has it been? Like, what are the challenges? I always like am so inspired by women that have been in this space for far longer than I am, because I'm like, you just have kept it going, and thank you for that. You've seen some things.
Yeah, look, I think that, you know, chorus of tiny violins here, but like we're probably subject to a lot of the same things that everybody is. I think first and foremost, we never lose the fact that like we're in such a privileged position to be even able to go raise our first fund, right? Like there's the GP commit, there's having a network of LPs, in our case, friends and family, that were willing to say, I don't even need to look at the deck, I'm in, right? Like, and that's, we were humbled, but you know, we, to this day, like we know how fortunate we are to be in the position that we were in. You know, I will say that in the beginning, pitching LPs in particular, so those like maybe one step outside of our network, where we do the full sort of pitch on who we are, and things like that, it really felt like, and again, this is where the tiny violence come in, they were excited to meet with us, and already we sort of occupied like a space in the mental map of different types of funds. And what I mean by this is, you know, we would meet with like a group of family offices, and they would sort of start out by saying, you know, diversity and inclusion is so important to us, and we are so, you know, we've been looking forward to this meeting and so excited to hear what you're saying. And they had viewed the deck, like, you know, I use DocSend like everyone, and I know that they had gone through the materials, and nowhere do we say that we are like a DEI focused fund. And, you know, we talked about our backgrounds and where we work as operators, and, you know, what our investment thesis was. So I think it was more interesting that, you know, in the fundraising process, like we were discovering sort of where we sat in the landscape as we were having these conversations. The number of times, again, like absolutely, like it was well intentioned, but the number of times that we were referred to other prospective LPs by saying, "Oh, they're working on, you know, social impact. This is the social impact, you know, investing group." And if you look at the definition of like impact investing, it's that there is, you know, a great, there's potential to make a big impact in either social or environmental causes, with financial returns being secondary. And again, we were trying to be a venture fund. Like the objective of a venture fund is to return, you know, capital and make money for the fund. And so I think that was sort of like a discovery that we had that I don't know if, you know, let's say two male GPs starting their first fund would have faced. And then like also like, you know, sometimes where we got past on was sort of, oh, we just invested in this other female GPs fund, so we feel like it's similar. And again, like, I'm familiar with who that GP is and have a ton of admiration and respect for her. But like, I look at the thesis and couldn't be more different, and our backgrounds couldn't be more different. And so it really felt like a lot of the women who were starting funds were all fighting for a very small number of spots.
And then that
that
leads, that spirals into scarcity mindsets and all these other bad things that permeate in our world. And, that is so interesting. It's kind of it's like a slight pet peeve of mine as well. Like, because my content like happens to cover a lot of women or cover a lot of diverse individuals and just bring them into the fold and have their insights and analysis and quotes put out there, I'm like subjected to like a DEI newsletter. I'm like, nope, this is a fintech newsletter. Thank you. I am speaking about fintech. That is not what this is. But it is interesting, right? Like, it's kind of getting to like some of the root of the problem, right? It's not that it's like the initial thought of, okay, well, you're like a woman or diverse individual, so you are put in some sort of category. And I'm like really dying for that to stop happening. I would like to not be put in a category.
Yeah, and the thing to call out, the thing that's not lost on me is that it is so well-intentioned, right? It's not like, I'm not yelling that there is discrimination or racism or sexism here. It's just, it's like implicit, it's like the implicit bias and sort of like where, I use this analogy of just like where you sit in their mental map, like, right? And so, it's super interesting. I think similarly, from a deal flow, on the deal flow side, I think, Mina and I are very specific. Like, every chance we get to talk about the fund, we say we invest in 3 areas. We invest in enterprise SaaS, fintech, and commerce. And so pretty clear about that, pretty clear about our operating experience working at software companies. Yet, most of the inbound deals that we get or referrals that we get are for companies that are like, a lot of the inbound deal flow that we get from, frankly, sometimes our own LPs and our own friends who like know what our focus areas are. Is they just really want us to meet companies that are building, products for women. And we definitely will look at those. We're super excited. But I think like when we look at our deal flow versus anyone else's deal flow who has the same, focus area, thesis, or background, we will disproportionately get like the female founded D2C company, right? And I think that's fine. Like, for us, like, we don't get annoyed or bothered by it, but it's like at the end of the day, it's just another thing where we're like, no, we're here to win. And, we think that what's going to create lasting change in venture, in startups, in tech is sort of seeing women succeed. And so we're very focused. It's our fund 1. We're very focused on picking winners, returning the fund and then some. And I think having that as a North Star, but also having, personal values that definitely make us look at more diverse backgrounds in terms of like where these best ideas are coming from. It's sort of like how we play.
No, I mean, and we need to see more of it in the space. And I think, a lot of what you said makes me think of even creating FinTech is Femme. Like I said, none of us really want to be put in these like buckets of, okay, well, like I only do this. I never ever intended on this brand or anything that I do to be female exclusive, right? Like only for women, because I also don't see that as the solution. Like, I think of it as like the opposite of an all male, an all white male team is just an all female one. Like and that's not, what we need either. We need the holistic full scope of diverse individuals, right? In all different types of forms. And that's what creates win, right? That's what study after study shows us creates, right? Higher returns, more profitability, right? More engaged teams, X, Y, and Z. So, and I know that there's like an element of like lack of transparency, I think, just like in the VC world that you have maybe seen firsthand in terms of having that diversity that holistic diversity, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that having been part of startups and going through recruiting as a hiring manager and watching startups grow and talk about diversity a lot and have big tech put out their diversity report every year, it seems like, and then reporters then latch on to the data that's available. It seems like the conversation is dominated by the conversation is around how many people work at startups, how many people work at tech companies. And then you see more and more, numbers on like how many women are actually starting companies. And now, like, I think like the information came out with this diversity index to rank like 1 through 100 the most to least diverse venture firms measured by women who are check writers, right? And so you're seeing more transparency happen at every layer of the value chain, frankly. But the one area we are frankly never going to get information about is the LP layer. And, there's many reasons for that, mostly because the SEC doesn't require funds to disclose who their LPs are. So it's like there's very limited data outside of just like small sample survey data, right? And if you are somebody who believes that all things start at the top, I'm somebody who believes that, then, we're really not going to see meaningful change until we change the makeup of the LPs in this country. And then it's uncomfortable, but when you start asking yourself, how do we change who's writing checks into funds, it has to do with personal wealth. And so, who are high net worth individuals who start, writing small checks into venture funds, and who's running endowments and pension funds and big fund of funds. Like, those are the questions we have to start asking, and then how they got there, and then you inevitably get to like the whole like the systemic issue of how wealth is created in this country. And so, it's like the most underreported layer is the LP layer, and it really starts with them. They have to be ones who are diverse, demanding diversity, at every step down the line. But we're seeing more women. We're seeing, like, I think Carta was the first, like 2 years ago, to start reporting on some numbers of what the makeup of LP bases were. And so I'm starting to see more conversation around that. So super optimistic. And I think, Twitter has been great in that, you're hearing a lot of women talk about, their experiences writing checks into funds. So, yeah.
Yeah, I know. I feel like thanks Twitter for showing me so many women who are like, "Hi, I am writing checks. Yes, it's me.
Yeah.
Hello, come meet me." And I also think, so yes, on the LP side and the lack of transparency there, but then also couple that with many things, but particularly bringing in the lack, I think, of awareness and diversity in the type of fintech companies that women are founding, or at least that you're getting to be able to see, right? Like that's coming in for you. And, it's like there's typically more like D2C focus or financial wellness or, that kind of thing. And that those spaces are just, they're like oversaturated. I mean, always room for innovation everywhere. But, like you also need diversity in like the type of companies that you're even looking for. And I think that comes with literally just a lack of awareness of what like women see themselves as of being capable of creating in the fintech space. Like there's so much more than just like another investing or app or finance wellness app, right? There's many sectors of fintech that need help.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, to just go back to like the way we look at founders and what they're building is like, is this going to be a massive business? Is it meeting a truly unmet need in the market? And so again, like nobody has a monopoly on being right. No particular person, has an advantage of building like, the idea that's gonna like meeting the big unmet need in the market. And so I think for us, like we're just looking for huge businesses and that our needs aren't being met today. And I think anybody can really build in that category. My train of thought. But yeah, why don't we continue?
I mean, I would be curious, like, what do you think about, I don't know, how do we get more women to see like other sectors of fintech outside of very like B2C and very like, investing app financial wellness focus, like as opportunities too, you know, like where are B2B girlies at, if you will, you know, like getting like
Yeah.
more awareness around innovation, looking for innovation elsewhere, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think that having a grasp on, financial services does give you a big advantage, whether you're a builder or an operator or investor in fintech. So, if the stats are true that 50% of the entry level workforce entering financial services are women, it's like I would say all of those women are qualified to then go build the next app that's going to help improve all of our lives. I mean, I think what's so interesting about the differences that you're pointing out is like we're leaving it to women to build products for other women, and then we're leaving it to men to build products for everyone. And it's like, why? And so,
Bingo.
I would just say like, you can't be what you don't see. And I think right now we have this sort of loop where it's like, well, the successful female founders that we talk about are the ones that happen to have, started a lot of these like D2C companies and these great consumer sort of savings apps and things like that. So then that probably inspires more, entrepreneurs to go start companies like that. So I would just say that's like another reason why Mina and I cling to like, no, that the way that we're going to make an impact is for us to be a venture firm that is successful, and for people to want to, take money from us because they see that like we can be helpful, and for LPs to want to invest in us because, they want a piece of these returns. And so I think it's really focused on like it's hard again, like when there isn't a lot of representation of exactly, what you see right in front of you. But, I think being a founder is hard for 100 other reasons too. So hopefully the women who are working in financial services, like, they're going to build the next mass consumer payments app, or they're going to build, the best neobank or.
Well, yeah. And well, because, I guess then I would ask like what areas of fintech are most interesting to you right now, for all my female founding listeners out there.
So from the fund, we are super interested in, you've heard vertical SaaS for a long time, like vertical fintech is really interesting to us. So what are the sectors that, frankly, haven't benefited from sort of this fintech revolution? What we mean by that are like, what are the categories where we really feel like, having a better financial stack, having like easier payments and smoother transactions and more automated processes, like how could that really benefit everyone in that industry? And so, we tend to look for, fintech applications in like alcohol distribution is one. Masavo is a company that we invested in a couple months ago. Or like, Noodle is another company we invested in. They're trying to be the financial stack for every single member LLC. And, starting with people who identify as like solopreneurs. So people who are giving like guitar lessons online, or, golf pros who are teaching one-on-one lessons and things like that. So I think just, like more verticalized applications of fintech is something that we get really excited about. And that really comes to, like our personal stories and sort of why we started Phenomenal Ventures, which is we have been so lucky to be a part of this Silicon Valley ecosystem, since Facebook days. And we've seen how all of these big companies, they grow. And what's interesting is, and the Twitter problem only sort of exacerbates this, where you have like a founder who has a pitch deck and talks about the TAM being a certain size. And then when you look at like the next 5 moves they make going to market, it's all really just marketing to who they know. And I think it's like Paul Graham or somebody from YC saying, giving advice to founders saying like, build for yourself, build products that solve problems for you, market to yourself. And that is all excellent advice, because as a marketer, I'll say the most important thing is audience, right? Resonating and speaking their language and all of this. But the problem is when all of our founders tend to come from the same background and from the same places and have very similar life experiences, well, then we're only building products for those people, and they're only marketing to each other, and sort of like they're only marketing on Twitter, where Twitter is not the market.
Yes,
I know it's shocking. I personally spend 24 hours a day on Twitter, but it's not. And so, yes. So I think for us, we are really inspired by how do we take best in class technology, these top founders that we're connected to, we're so fortunate to be part of this ecosystem, and have them solve problems and apply their talents and skills to solving problems in sectors that have frankly not been big draws for us in Silicon Valley. And how do we help improve the lives of Americans who are experiencing low efficiency? So something we get really excited about is taking an industry that's operating at 50% efficiency and making it 60% efficient because of technology, versus what I think Silicon Valley's historically been obsessed with, which is taking something that's 90% efficient and making it incremental, right? 91% efficiency. So, we invest in a lot of sort of unsexy businesses that are applying fintech and SaaS.
Right? Yeah. Back to the point of, you do need to know, yourself, your personal story, and you do need to, kind of look at, something I do often is just look at what is happening in the world and what could I, use my personal story and experiences to create, right, improvements in this existing system, in this thing that's already here, as opposed to reinventing the wheel, or maybe trying to make something that's already almost perfect as good as possible, even more perfect. So that actually is that does tie, I think, all in and together, and everything you're saying on this show is just really absolutely amazing, and you're crushing it. Let me ask one more question, Internet. If we need to be the change that we wish to see, what changes do you wish to see in fintech, and how do you embody it?
Ooh, okay. Changes I want to see in fintech, I think just keeping top of mind that if you are a builder and you are building a product that serves everyone, it's not actually gonna, you're not gonna be able to deliver on that promise unless you have people working on that mission that are representative of the ultimate group that you want to serve. And so the thing I said earlier about why are we leaving it to men to solve women's problems in finances? Why are we leaving it to men to solve problems for everybody, right? And so I would just say, know yourself. If you're not a founder, you don't have to, you don't have to be well, I'm a woman, I've got this much of experience in financial services, I should probably go be a female founder in fintech. No one's asking you to do that. But just, I think that the thing that I'd love to see is just being cognizant at every level that, financial services, industry, it touches everyone. Everyone touches money. Nobody is excluded from this. And so we need everyone working on that problem. And so you need that from the investment layer, you need that on a board, you need that, who's founding companies, who's on the executive team, who's making hiring decisions. So you just need it at every level. So I'd just love to see just more representation that mirrors, frankly, the representation of this country or this market. And so the role that we play in that is just sticking around and trying to be successful and trying to be, successful, emerging managers.
Really, really well said, Helen. Thank you so much for joining me on Humans of FinTech. This has been awesome. There is no silver bullet to gender parity and social parity in our spaces, but the holistic approach that we've honestly outlined in this entire show, this is basically how to actually have a holistically diverse ecosystem in fintech and venture 101 course. That's basically what this is. I hope people take these insights and put them to work at wherever they're at, whether they're a founder, an investor, LP, you name it. So thank you for sharing and for being so open and honest.
Oh, thank you. It's great to be here.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode. To hear our next story from another diverse leader, be sure to tune in next week. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to our show and give it a 5-star rating, as it helps our message reach more people who want to find belonging too. Thanks for tuning in.